Hello. So I've decided to start a newsletter. I've started this on LinkedIn, which is like the best website on the internet for business cringe. So my newsletter though is about technology and just like the like whatever I've done this week, like any subject I've touched on where I think I can write about it, tools I've discovered, that kind of thing. So far, it had DeepSeek, which I wasn't impressed with, possibly because I didn't try the proper version of it. But there you go. Yeah, AppScript, a whole bunch of other stuff. Then yeah, erasure codes to entropy. Uh, not many people liked that. And then eBPF, WASM shouldn't exist. Go fast with unikernels. Yeah, unikernels are really cool. And then finally this week, which is what this video is going to be about, and I'm just going to basically talk through this week's newsletter. Um, Depending how this goes, I'll keep just doing this on YouTube. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, and I've also posted my newsletter to my website as well. So if you don't want to go on LinkedIn, you can get it from my website. I just have text-only versions at the moment on my website. There's none of the pictures, and there's an Atom feed for my website as well. So if you're old school and you don't want pictures, you just want to see some text in your Atom feed, then that's where you can go for that. Okay, so this week, what language does farm equipment speak? How's the Internet of Tractors looking? Um, how not to write a web app. So yeah, I mean, and yeah, this was triggered by Pocketbase, which is pretty awesome. So this is about my this I created this calendar app. It's availability calendar app, which like ostensibly is quite a simple app. But wow, did I spend a lot of time on this. And learned a lot of lessons from it, but I also kind of think I could have just listened to what people say about how to create a web app. I mean, it's different if you're doing it for a hobby. It's like, yeah, just write it from scratch, do whatever you want. But if you're actually trying to do something that makes money, then yeah, take the advice that's generally available. And I'll get into that in a moment. And then avoid upset by understanding the three types of open source software. So this is like a bit of a theory I've developed, like based on what a few open source creators have said, and sort of how I think about how people capture value from open source. Okay, so let's get started with farm equipment. So, would it surprise you to learn that agricultural equipment, and from what I can gather, most manufacturing equipment uses a protocol that has remained largely unchanged from the 1980s? Depending on your background, it may surprise you that farm equipment contains networked computer equipment at all. However, it does, and I'm not talking about weather stations that transmit readings over LoRaWAN or things that can be secreted on top of existing infrastructure. So yeah, this isn't like, okay, we've taken a farm and like we've dumped some equipment on top of it. It's like this is talking about the stuff that's already there and has been there for quite some years now. So yeah, I'm talking about heavy duty industrial equipment such as wood chip boilers, which is what's pictured below just there, and heat distribution systems for greenhouses, among a host of other things. So yes, I mean like someone might have a boiler like this, which is like an industrial scale wood chip boiler, and this will produce hot water or steam or whatever that's then used in a greenhouse, and there's like there's a distribution system for the heat it produces, and there's actually multiple systems and devices linked together here to do this work. Um, which, yeah, I'm not, I'm dealing with the like sort of the computerized side of this, and I don't fully understand how like a greenhouse system works yet. But there's a lot more to this than it's just like you have one machine and you turn it on. There's like multiple stages to this. And obviously you don't want your greenhouse to be too hot, and you don't want like a delay when it gets too cold. If the temperature drops outside rapidly, you want to like spin up your boiler quickly before your plants start to I don't know what the right term is, but yeah, before you lose growth potential in your greenhouse. And then yeah. So I mean, these machines they often have Ethernet connections, which actually I found kind of surprising, or at least pleasantly surprising. And they have VNC for remote access. But yeah, I mean, it's all very well and good. So okay, so you can access this machine remotely using VNC. That's great. Um, but if you want to do some sort of automatic control of it, it's like, yeah, you can get a screen reader to read a VNC session and send mouse click buttons and stuff. I mean, it's actually what OpenQA does when we're testing, when say a company like SUSE that made OpenAI, a company like SUSE that's making OpenQA, like they use that to automate the operating system installation. If you're not familiar, like SUSE makes Linux distribution, and yeah, so you can do that with VNC, but ideally you want something more like Modbus over TCP, which is what these machines have. Or they have Modbus over serial, which is, yeah, I mean, it would be useful, except that often the Modbus over serial, like it's already connected from the display panel or the PCL, the programmable computer, was it programmable controller logic device. Like the Modbus will be connected between like the display that's on the front of the machine. You can't really see that from here, but and the control board or the power board. So yeah, in theory, you can sort of insert a device into that, which will act as a serial to Ethernet bridge or relay, but in practice it might require like interfering with the machine and generally just cause a bit of hassle. I mean, by electrical engineering standards, this stuff is like trivial child's play, but when you're sort of going into a machine like this and then rewiring it and stuff, you at least like want to get the manufacturer's blessing and stuff. So it's can cause a bit of a roadblock. Yeah, so my experience is with a single farm, but practically all the equipment supports Modbus with one or two exceptions. So yeah, it's like some very, very old equipment that it's not clear if it's using Modbus or something else. I mean, it might still be using Modbus, it's just not clear what it's doing. And it certainly doesn't have Ethernet, so it's just got some serial cable coming out of it. And this is exciting because it means there is a way to create a centralized system that collects telemetry data and tune equipment based on feedback. The problem is that Modbus is a very basic protocol that just allows setting and reading registers. What the data in each register means is machine dependent and either requires a register map or reverse engineering to understand. So the Modbus protocol is pretty simple. It's an old protocol. It has some slightly unusual language in it, coming at it from a software engineering background, because it was sort of written with electrical engineers in mind. I guess. I don't really know, but I guess yes, it's coming from a slightly different place than where I'm coming from, sort of from the high level software universe. But underneath it's just a really simple protocol with either 1-bit registers or you can have 16-bit registers. But what data is in those registers, you need a register map to understand that. And so I've already covered this, but I'll go into it again. A second issue is finding a way to plug into Modbus when it is already connected to the display panel or a PCL via serial. It may require physically interfering with the machine and getting a Modbus or MQTT gateway. None of the devices had MQTT. I mean, this is sort of, before looking at this, MQTT was what I was generally aware of in IoT, and that's what people talk about the most, I guess. But none of them have that, I don't think. But it's quite easy to take Modbus and put it on MQTT, I guess. But you still need to have that register map. I gather that MQTT is a bit more self-describing, so if you have a machine that produces MQTT, that's better. And also MQTT has, it's like a multi, it handles it much better if you have a lot of machines talking to each other. It has a message queue and so on. You have like an MQTT server that takes all of the MQTT nodes, like client traffic, and stores it in a resilient queue, I guess. Yeah, and you can buy a lot of equipment straight off the shelf. You can plug this serial to Ethernet gateway. You can just plug that, or Wi-Fi gateway. You can just plug that straight into a lot of these machines. They have a rail which you can just clip this onto, and then wire in the serial. I'd say like about half the machines have a rail system which you can just clip stuff onto. Now for those of you who are used to working with a Kubernetes cluster with full observability tooling or work in data engineering, imagine going from having a bunch of disparate systems that require a human to run between them to communicate to a centralized observability and data analysis platform with all of the tools developed for the cloud and big data. At this point, I'm not talking about doing anything really fancy, just having a Grafana or Metabase dashboard with everything that happens that day to all of the devices and sensors would be a huge improvement. In high-end motorsport, it's required to have telemetry from every part of the vehicle just to be competitive, and I don't believe having fast and detailed telemetry would be any less valuable in agriculture. While all of these machines are digitized and even network, they are still essentially islands, and if we extrapolate this to many other industries, it's easy to see the potential. There are many networked machines out there which only require minor hardware updates and some software to be entered into an integrated whole. The major challenge is that every machine is different. Modbus isn't self-describing, and you can be sure most of the equipment manufacturers don't publish the docs in a convenient location. So I mean, it feels a bit like walking into the past, looking at this equipment. It's nice that they do have Ethernet connections, and you can kind of start plugging into them. I mean, even serial connections are nice with Modbus protocol. But imagine like you can get all of the telemetry out of these machines, and I mean, this machine produces a lot of telemetry. For example, there's a lot of sensors in here. There's a lot of actuators and like valves, and there's all kinds of things where you can take a reading from that and look at those results. And how much of that is useful, say to the farmer running the farm? I mean, it's like, well, I'm guessing quite a lot, because again, this thing doesn't just run on its own. It may not really be possible to tune this better than the manufacturer has already done, but you can look at sort of how long this thing takes to ramp up, and and sort of look at the inner workings of how long it takes to ramp up and stuff like that, like how fast how like shoveling more or less pellets in, wood pellets in affects the time, sort of how long it takes to ramp down as well, and then compare that to readings from the fans which are blowing the hot air or the steam around the greenhouse, and compare like what temperatures they're showing and like how fast they're blowing and this sort of thing, and then graph that all and look at it and then compare it with temperature readings from inside the greenhouse from, you can just put some temperature monitors in there that are separate from this system, and sort of look at sort of how the temperature in the greenhouse is varying with what these machines are showing internally. I think there's a lot of potential there, and you can take all of these readings, and instead of just sort of having to put this all down on a spreadsheet, we can throw all of the great tooling we have, like Grafana, at it, and all of this tooling which has been sort of highly developed for the cloud world, and other industries like that. So I mean, yeah, you look at something like high-tech robotics and stuff like that, then they've already got all of this stuff, and it's a case of like allowing other industries to catch up. Yeah, this is courtesy of AI. We have Karl Marx trying to attach a Ethernet gateway to a tractor. Yeah, as Karl Marx observed, technology or human progress in general advances unequally. In some areas, we are racing ahead with LMs that are going to replace you next year. Yeah. And in others, we are trying to get a machine to report sensor readings using technologies that have barely changed since the 1970s. Yeah. I hope you can't hear my son crying in the background, but yeah, apparently he wants a lollipop. Okay, so on to the next article. I mean, yeah, this makes me want to cry as well. Should have used Pocketbase. One of my regrets when creating Dubuck was that I didn't use something like Pocketbase. Instead, I recreated a whole bunch of plumbing needed by any web app. What you get with Pocketbase: orphan user management, meaning you don't have to implement passwords or OAuth2 endpoints, session tokens and all of this stuff. I mean, you still have to make a UI for it if that's needed, but yeah, you don't have to do all the back-end plumbing. Collections and records API that abstracts away SQLite or SQL in general. You don't have to write SQL or deal with ORM, like object relational mapper. It's a bit more simpler than an ORM, I think. A bit less magic going on in the background. Yeah, automatic database migrations, so you don't have to think too much about that. I mean, it's just a migration solution, and you don't have to sort of think about the different migration solutions. Inbuilt admin and database UI, which is it would have been really useful for me to have something like this, because I ended up with Redis, and then I ended up with KeyDB, which is a Redis clone. And I still don't have a decent UI just to sort of go and edit my users and stuff like that, and change settings in the back end. Instead, I actually have like an API type command line thing that I use, which I wrote myself. But I mean, it would have been easier just to have a UI. And then scale to thousands of concurrent connections on a low-cost VM. It is really fast. I think they say on the website something like, you can have 10,000 concurrent connections on like the cheapest VM you can buy. So yeah, I mean, it's really fast, and it's written in Go, which is pretty fast, and it's not like quite as fast as C, but it's good enough. And then SQLite is really surprisingly fast. It can beat PostgreSQL on a lot of metrics. Especially if if you do like a large number of small queries, because it's in process, it's much quicker at doing that. There's not like this connection to the database. So yeah, you can do like lots of small queries in SQLite and not have to worry too much. I mean, if you're doing that with Superbase, then you've got some complications there, because Superbase, sorry, not Superbase, Pocketbase. Yeah, Superbase is what one of the ones that Pocketbase is kind of an alternative to. But yeah, I mean, okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. And completely self-contained and easy to host. It really is. It's just like you do. I mean, it's just like most Go projects. I find you can just git clone them and do Go run and they'll work. It's one of the amazing things about Go. It's just really easy to run almost any project, as long as the project isn't sort of. You get somewhere they've like added a make script and they're using C Go, and they're doing all kinds of stuff that makes it hard because they've brought in all of this other tooling into their Go project. But this is like almost a pure Go project. You can actually compile it as pure Go, I think. You only need C Go for extra performance for the SQLite library. The CGO SQLite library is faster than the pure Go one. And then there's more stuff like cron jobs, backups, and so on. On the downside, it is pre 1.0, and they specifically warn of breaking changes. Breaking changes are always a risk in web development, but if they actually warn you of it, then I tend to err on the side of caution. At least now I err on the side of caution after being burned by SvelteKit. I've been burnt by multiple times by Svelte. especially now that Svelte 5 has come along. Some people say it's worse, some people say it's better, and I'm like, I really wish I'd pick something that doesn't really change much, as I'm not a front end dev really. Um, yeah, I'm just not a great front end dev, and I don't want to have to be relearning the front end all the time. It was hard enough having to learn it the first time, despite years of being like, I have like commits in the kernel and the Linux kernel and stuff, but still, yeah, front end, it's like a whole universe unto itself, and like I don't want to be learning multiple frameworks. I assume that Pocketbase is a play on the names of Firebase and Superbase. All of these abstract away a lot of the plumbing associated with making even the most trivial of SaaS. Unless an app is completely stateless, then people who are used to ahem, writing zero dependency low level code where 1 millisecond is a long time can quickly get into a mess when they see the disgusting mess that JavaScript libraries represent and thus decide to do everything themselves. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, you can get into a bigger mess by trying to do anything, like trying to solve the JavaScript ecosystem, or say, okay, I'm going to write this library is obviously bloated and I don't need most of it, so I'm going to rewrite it myself. It's very easy to underestimate. Or I think, to be fair, like I didn't even underestimate the time. I just did it anyway. And yeah, I think most of the time you're not gonna get like. I mean, my app is like ultra fast. Um, I think the only way to get it faster would be to remove Svelte and like do pure JavaScript, or make solid JS claim that they're faster than Svelte, but like there's almost everything on the front end and the back end is like I have very few dependencies for this app. Um, and like the plus side to that of having very few dependencies is that I very rarely have to actually update it. Very rarely, because there are so few dependencies. It's only when something like a major changes, like Svelte itself, or like I ended up using I suppose I don't have to use, but I did use the, what's it called? The payments library, the payment provider that everyone uses. I'm going to log in now and go and have a look so I can try and remember what it is. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah, you already know Stripe. Yeah. So I use Stripe. I use their library because it's really clean compared to most JavaScript libraries. I actually went even as far as not using Google's client library. And I mean, my app like primarily integrates with Google. That's who you synchronize with and stuff. Um, so, but I decided not to use their library and I use their API directly. So I don't have to, I only have to update something when actually part of the Google API changes that affects me, which has never happened. Even though they've sent me warnings saying we're going to change something you use, like they didn't actually change anything that affects me. So yeah, and on top of that, I've got an integration with JMap, so I can use Fastmail to send emails to myself, and yeah, loads and loads of crazy stuff that I did and wrote all myself. Yeah, probably got I've got my own calendar stuff in there. I did actually use a third-party calendar library. Calendars are like crazily complicated. The reality is one may be able to produce something better in one particular area. Let's say an area of very great importance to one's particular application. However, everything else should be accepted as it is because there just isn't enough time to sort through all of the details and craft a solution specific to your needs. This is a very domain-dependent statement, and that was the issue for me because when crafting some fundamental low-level code, it can absolutely make sense to pay attention to every detail. Again, I can't stress this enough. Like, I guess, like in most of sort of the higher level software industry, the common wisdom, and usually the correct wisdom, is like you don't go reinventing the wheel and touching lower bits of the stack. But let's say you want to try and create something like Bun.js, then yeah, actually you do want to go and poke at every little thing, because every single dependency you have is going to make it harder to compile your application. And on a very large application, it could eventually be that people just can't compile it. And if you already have dependencies like a JavaScript engine in there and stuff like that, you really want to strip back as much stuff as possible. So yeah, in systems programming, it often does make sense to go and strip everything out. I guess like even if you're making like a SaaS, which is, or I mean like even if you take my application and you look at like the core of the application, like the calendar, like this is sort of the thing that every single user sees, and like whatever is in the background to support this particular bit and the front end, like you can justify spending as much time as you want doing this part of the app, like just this widget and the bit that synchronizes the calendars, the algorithm behind it, like the stuff that's very, very specific to your app. You can justify stripping back everything and getting into it and writing it all from scratch. It's going to give you an edge in like a very, very competitive market because there's like a trillion calendar apps out there. So if you're going to find an edge, it's going to be like doing something niche and like stripping out something that everybody else uses. But yeah, just don't start re-implementing stuff that has very little impact in your core product. So Pocketbase makes no attempt to scale horizontally, and this is another important point. I wanted to have my app's data replicated around the world so that it could be accessed with low latency in any location. I got hooked on the idea of doing this at the database level and using eventual consistency for most operations. I managed to do it using KeyDB, but its only benefit was an educational one, meaning that, yeah, I learned a lesson. I have to admit that basic caching could have solved this problem in my particular app. Even just a CDN like KeyCDN could do most of it, I reckon. If the VM running Pocketbase goes down, this could be an issue, but if most functions of the website keep running from the cache, it's not a huge one. Finally, if you really need to scale horizontally, it can be done at the application level, which is, yeah, you'll find like lots of articles of people complaining about trying to scale horizontally that way and how hard it is and whatever. But from like the point of view of a founder rather than the engineer who has to clean up the mess that the founder created, you know, you just want to like get your app out there and see if anyone will buy it. All of this stuff, like getting it to scale around the world, like again, like this bit of the app, you know, I can cache I can cache this at the edge, and like the end user, you know, when someone embeds this calendar in their website, which is how it's intended to work, um, then you know you can just have like your little VMs around every data center in the world caching the calendar data from the back end and serving it up really quick. And you can even, yeah, you don't even need to program that. You can use a CDN that will cache the JSON and everything. It'll just, you know, and then, you know, if you want it to be fast when people log in, I mean, you can still use some sort of caching and eventual consistency, like in-memory caching. Yeah, so I mean, and you know, there's some things as well that like you're always going to have to contact a centralized database for some things. Like, you know, there's a feature here to change the nickname. The nickname that, you know, this is something I shouldn't have added. I shouldn't have added back button support. It was a mistake. Because yeah, just select a few different months and have to click back through all of them. That was I have to get rid of that at some point. But yeah, where was I? Yeah, you can change your nickname, and like when a user wants to change their nickname, it's like a global thing, so you've got to have a single source of truth. And so, what are your options for that? Like, you either have one database that is the like global source of truth, or you have like a quorum where you have to like confirm, every node has to confirm it accepts the new nickname, or at least most of the nodes have to confirm they accept the new nickname before going ahead. And you know, like these sorts of distributed system problems are just something that most apps don't need to deal with ever. And they're also not problems that there's any sort of magic bullet for. Like whatever database solution you use or whatever, like it's going to have to deal with you're going to have to deal with these problems. You know, if you're using a database that has support for eventual consistency or for like reaching consensus or whatever, you're going to have to choose like what you have to tell the database like how you want it to do that, which is going to be more complicated than just using SQLite. Okay, so yeah, I mean it doesn't scale horizontally. And I mean, the other thing is like, let's say like, yeah, okay, if the main server of the database goes down, okay, like it might be annoying if a user is like right at that point trying to update something when the database is down, but actually the most of the website can continue to function even if the database is down. You could even, I mean, you could even have like the clients as a backup go and sort of the caching nodes as a backup go and update directly from Google's calendar. There's loads and loads of stuff I could have done. Okay, so finally, Pocketbase is a true open source project rather than a sales funnel for something else. This got me thinking about open source again and the different types of open source, which I'll explain below. Yeah, so I mean, actually, if you are thinking about creating like a web app as like an indie hacker project or something, you know, use Superbase or Firebase. I'd recommend probably Superbase is better at this point than Firebase. I don't know what Google have just like. It's so frustrating going into the Google Cloud Console. It just takes so long to do anything. They really need to fix the performance of that. You know, it's not like they don't have any people good at performance working at Google. Oh yeah, and I did use KeyDB, which is actually a really awesome database, which allows eventual consistency and everything. So that's like an awesome product. But I mean, just in the right domain, you know. The three types of open source project. So I woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding and sweating, and thought there are three types of open source. I think I had eaten too much chocolate before going to bed and was having an insulin crash. But obviously this must have been percolating somewhere in the back of my mind. So the three types of open source, according to me, the sales funnel, art, the collaboration. The sales funnel was an open source project where the motivation to maintain and develop it comes from the marketing value of being the developer of the open source software, for the obvious reason that open source cannot be sold. There is no way to directly make money from it. However, one way you can extract value from it is by integrating it into your sales funnel. I guess actually there is one exception. You can directly ask for donations, or just sort of have like an honesty payment thing where you say pay as much as you want. But it's like, I mean, I don't know. You can kind of also see donations as like a separate product that you're selling. And actually, the Superbase maintainer no longer wants to make donations unless he said, he'll take sponsorship, whatever. If a company wants to give him some money, that's fine. He doesn't really want donations from individuals anymore, but they can give him like money as long as there's no strings attached. Because he said often with donations or whatever, there's like some, the person who's donating expects something from him. Like they expect him to finish their feature request or deal with their support thing, or whatever. There's like some implicit, even though it's called a donation, there's like still some implicit kind of like some motivation behind the donation usually. Excuse me, but oh no, I can feel a cough coming on. Winter, one cold after another. So yeah, I mean, there's often like some implied things. So I mean, actually, you can still see donations as really as like a separate thing. Anyway, if the art project encompasses, hold on. The sales funnel is an open source project where the motivation to maintain and develop it comes from the marketing value of being the developer of the open source software, for the obvious reason that open source cannot be sold. Okay, we've already done this. Getting distracted. If the art project encompasses a wide range of motivations, including those that defy analysis, perhaps the author is Wow, I need to rewrite this. Yeah, so an art project is something that encompasses a wide range of motivations, including those that defy analysis. Perhaps the author is motivated by status and recognition, or the pure joy of creating or learning. Maybe they want to make something that spreads and see what happens, just to make their mark on reality. Finally, there is the collaboration, where a group of individuals or companies get together to develop and maintain an open source project. The motivation is primarily the economic value of running the code and the cost savings of developing it together, instead of individually or by paying a third party. Okay, so yeah, the art project, it's like, someone's doing it for maybe it's like a hobby project, or they're just doing it for learning, or they're doing it just to express themselves. And the collaboration is like sort of actually what I see as true open source, where a group of people get together and they say, okay, if we like try and develop if each of us try to develop this thing separately, it's going to be very expensive. and we don't really want to try selling this thing. We want to develop as well, and we don't want to pay a third party to do it because they're just gonna like ransack us. So the three types are separated by how the authors capture value from the project or intends to capture value. Of course, a single project may have elements of all three types, which is pretty much always you have all three types in most projects. Pocketbase is more or less written by one person and looks like an art project with elements of collaboration. I mean, that might actually be slightly unfair to say that, but yeah, it kind of does look a bit like an art project from what the authors said, but then it is a very useful piece of software. The evidence of it being a sales funnel is very minor. I guess this is another thing, like you can pretty much any project, open source project, can accidentally be a sales funnel. But I mean, typically you'll see evidence of a sales funnel. You'll see that the person has like a back end. If you sort of see like something like this newsletter or an open source project that's created by a startup, like that's their front end, and then the back end is whatever services you're trying to sell. So my services are consultant, and a lot of open source projects will basically the maintainer will be for hire, or they'll be selling some other service. Typically, you look at any open source startup, then they have like the open core, and then that's their sales funnel. And rarely a collaboration. I mean, sometimes, yeah, they actually, quite often it's like one company that only develops this thing, so the collaboration aspect is barely there. So basically, the fact it's open source is marketing, and it's there are other advantages, like if it's completely open, then it's easy to review the code, which makes people happy, and also people feel happier. Lots of companies feel happier if they know the project can't just disappear when the company disappears. Even if the company abandons its development, they'll still be able to make critical fixes, or they'll, at least in theory. I mean, in practice, it might not be really possible, but it's good for sales. And yeah, there'll be other like motivations, but I'm simplifying. So if this newsletter were open source, it would primarily be a sales funnel. I do enjoy writing and spreading ideas purely for its own sake, but I have limited time to spend on hobbies. Committing myself to writing once a week on LinkedIn requires a financial justification. The most outrage occurs when a project giving the appearance of being a collaboration or an art piece suddenly flips to a non-open source license. Usually, though, this happens with the projects that are clearly a sales funnel for a SaaS product. So yeah, think about the times like I think it's like MongoDB. I think they did it. They switched to a source available license because of Amazon. Elasticsearch switched to a source available license, which actually, like, I'm pretty happy with source available. I think a lot of people felt betrayed by that, because it's like, okay, I'm also an open source contributor, so I know people are using my stuff for free, and now I have to pay for your stuff. Although it's not usually the developer that personally has to pay for anything; it's their employer. But yeah, it does get people's goat when someone says, okay, now you have to pay all of a sudden. Um, there is also upset when a project which nominally looks like art or a collaboration is revealed as being a sales funnel. Such is the case when the core developers get hired or acquired and the new owner puts their stamp on the project. Yeah, I think this often happens when sort of the core developer is is trying to like go it alone. And yeah, the project is basically at this point already a sales funnel, and if you look for the evidence, it's there. It's just that maybe the developer is struggling to actually effectively use it as a sales funnel, so it still looks like an art project or a collaboration. And then what happens is like they get acqui-hired or whatever, and then the new owner of the project who owns all the now owns that brand, then like puts their stamp on it and like puts some real marketing and some better sales in there, and it actually, yeah, upsets people. I'm not really sure why. Um, I think it can be. I mean, the thing is, actually, I suppose, yeah. When some companies start using a project and sponsoring the developers, thinking, okay, this is an independent project, and then when one of their competitors basically takes ownership of that project, insofar that you can with open source, this is often a trigger for other companies to fork the project and like try and turn it into a pure collaboration project, to make sure that one of their competitors isn't like deliberately driving the development of that project in a direction they don't want. Although, yeah, I don't know. It's not a situation that I've ever personally dealt with. As a user of open source or a contributor, you have an interest in knowing what really motivates a project's development. In absolute terms, I have no problem with any of the three types. I really don't. I don't even mind source available. I certainly don't mind uh, like secret source. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind like proprietary, whatever. Yeah, excuse me. So, however, I think it is useful to identify the type of project one is dealing with and whether that is suitable for your situation. Also, whether the project is likely to remain in a particular category or if there is a mismatch between contributor motivations and the outward appearance of the project. Clearly, most projects don't neatly fit into one of the three categories. I've seen strong evidence of all three in the Linux kernel, for example. There's clearly a sales funnel for the Linux Foundation and companies like SUSE. Yeah, one thing that surprised me about the Linux Foundation is all of these foundation projects and the Cloud Native Foundation and stuff like that. You actually pay to join the foundation. Like all of those projects, like someone's paid for that project to go in there, as far as I know. This isn't like stuff the Linux Foundation is sponsoring with all of the money that companies give it to develop Linux or help shepherd the development of Linux. This is actually the Linux Foundation's product, which is, yeah, you get your project in there and it gives it like the Linux Foundation stamp of approval and gives it some legitimacy, or a lot of legitimacy. And there is like a whole long process to do that and get your project in there, but yeah, basically you have to have the cash to do that, or get someone to sponsor it with deep enough pockets anyway. Meanwhile, Meta and Netflix collaborate on it because it costs them less than developing their own individual kernels. At least I know this is the case for Meta, because I think Zuckerberg went on a podcast and said the reason why they create Yama and release that as an open source model is because it created like this ecosystem around Yama, and it's cheaper for them to do that than to like go it alone, especially as they don't sell AI, they don't sell operating systems. Like Meta is a advertising company. That's where they make all their money. Well, that and WhatsApp as well. WhatsApp actually makes quite a lot of cash for their business offering, but yeah, they're not in the business of operating systems. Like they're only developing it for their own use, and they don't want to pay Microsoft or Apple, and they don't want to try and make their own thing. It's mostly true for Google as well, I guess, but they do actually make operating systems as well on their own. Finally, there are people who contribute just for the sake of taking part. Yeah, there's definitely like some people contribute to Linux because it's just like such a big project, and people see that as the place to go and add their thing, their go and get their finger in operating system development. And compared to like creating a pure hobby project that probably no one's ever going to use, your Linux code actually has to like get through review, and it has to people will actually use it if you go and put some code in there. Um, so there's a bunch of reasons to do it, even if you really like not trying to use it to get a job and you're not trying to do anything else. It's just like some weird motivation you have. Like people do that even with the Linux kernel, which is a very commercial project. So yeah, I think I got like this idea of the collaboration I got from Ron Evans, which yeah, I mean it's actually like out of open source. Like I do think the collaboration is like the the real like true open source, probably more than art even. Because with art, like I mean, you could just keep it to yourself for a lot of the time, or you could just show the end results. You don't really need to make it open source in some cases. Um, like collaboration is really taking advantage of the fact that everyone can come together and contribute and use it as they want. I mean, you don't with art like you could just make it source available if you really want people to see the source, or you could just make it public domain and just leave it, you know, not put any license on there at all. Like for a collaboration, you really need like a solid license, and because those things actually have a purpose. Yeah, so yeah, Ron Evans, I think he gave me the idea for that, and but I don't think he'd probably agree with with like putting things into three categories like this and whatever. But anyway, yeah, and also like there's the Austrian economics, like I guess like the more like libertarian end of economics, like gave me some ideas for this because like so when you're thinking about like why is it open source even exists in the first place, and like why do companies spend so much money on and even hiring people just to work on open source? Like SUSE paid me for many years just to write tests for the Linux kernel. I mean, um, like why? Well, it's because they are managing to extract value from it in some way, and it's not like a direct payment, not just saying here's a license for our software that you have to pay. They're finding some roundabout way to extract value from it. Or actually, no, in the case of like the pure collaboration, like Meta are directly extracting value from Linux. They're just using it. This is the key point. It's like a direct value extraction. They're using it and then they're getting monetary value when they eventually serve adverts at a cheaper cost. So yeah, basically, like the whole purpose of Facebook is to serve those adverts and get people to click on them. And developing the Linux kernel allows that to happen cheaper and faster with more observability. And that justifies Meta hiring kernel engineers to work on doing that, and all of the other stuff in between. Like I guess like there's loads of open source projects that Meta have either released themselves or contributed to. Okay, yeah, and of course, yeah, this newsletter is a sales funnel for my services. So yeah, feel free to get in touch and talk to me about Linux or any of the other stuff that's in my newsletters. I've got some past issues here. So yeah, if you like this, then give it an upvote, and I'll keep making them. Thanks.